I want to tell you the story about how I decided to design the cover of the Creative Process Diet. So obviously the book has a very simple cover. All it includes is the title. And my name is not on it. And on the back of the book it's simply the table of contents. So there's no testimonial, there's no blurb. When I pick up a book, the first thing I always do is I flip it over. And so when you flip over the Creative Process Diet, you're immediately immersed in content. And the spine of the book is also very simple. It includes the name, and that's it. And there's no adornment. So the book is very simple. And in addition to the book, there are also these other two books. This book is called Basic Forms, and this book is called Advanced Forms. And the title is not listed, but if you hold them up, you will notice that these stripes actually line up with the title on the Creative Process Diet. So there's a redacted effect. So it's almost as if these stripes are crossing out the title on the main title on the Creative Process Diet, except that the stripes wrap all the way around the books. So they are reminiscent of an athletic stripe. So that is the design of the Creative Process Diet. So when I was writing the book, I remember that I got to the point where I began to think very seriously about how to design the cover. So I went onto YouTube, as I love to do, and I began researching book covers and book cover designers. And that was how I learned about Chip Kidd, who is he's the guy. He works for Random House, and he has a reputation for coming up with the most amazing book covers that you can possibly think of. So I watched tons of videos. I love the way that he thinks about book covers, about how the most important thing is that the outside of the book is essentially a metaphor for what's inside the book. So your experience with the book cover in some way reflects what your experience is when you actually read the book. So I loved that idea, and at first I really believed that I needed to have Chip Kidd design the Creative Process Diet. So I spent several hours. I would say, this is me and my personality, I would say that I probably spent about 15 hours drafting an email to Chip Kidd, which I never sent. But I spent that much time trying to write the perfect email to him that would be just perfectly written, that would just persuade him without being too pushy, but that would make him feel just invited and welcome. I really wanted it to happen. So when I really want something to happen and I'm writing about it, boy, I work hard on it. So I worked very hard on that. And I worked so many hours on it. Like I said, I don't normally spend that much time on one email. But it felt so important to me. And I believed in my heart that if Chip Kidd designed the cover of the Creative Process Diet, then the book would succeed. That was all I needed, was for him to design the cover. So after I went through this, I began to think, it was a theme that developed throughout. I spent 2 years really of working on it intensively. And I realized that I often did that. I would often feel like someone else needs to come along and do something for me or for this book. And then when that someone else comes along and does something, then the book will be wonderful. But I had a hard time thinking that it's just wonderful as it is. So, and it's interesting. I had experiences, for example, with looking for a developmental or content editor. And I realized that when you write a book as unconventional as this one, that doesn't work, because you can't put new wine into old bottles. So it was a very interesting experience. I did hire someone to just check spelling and grammar and simple things like that. But aside from that, I did pretty much the whole thing by myself. So after spending all these hours writing this email to Chip Kidd, I realized that the lesson that I was seeking to internalize is just the idea that the outside of the book is most beautiful if it is a mirror of what's inside the book. So I decided to take the chip kit approach, and this book is a book where I really focused on making the text itself beautiful. So, the way that I formatted the paragraphs and the font that I chose, and the distance between the edges of the paragraphs and the side of the page. There's a book named Animal Family that inspired me in terms of how to set up the pages with a big space at the bottom, for example. So, I wrote this book in a school of visual art, and I approached it as a piece of visual art. So even though I was dealing with ideas and concepts, I also continually thought about it as a work of art and as something, as a visual experience. And I thought, how would someone who would put these on display in a museum think about how to set up a page? So while still thinking of it all as a book. So because I approached the inside of the book that way, I just felt like the outside of the book needed to be approached in the same way. And I really I've always loved letters. I really fell in love with letters and words even more when I was writing this book. So I thought, that's all I want on the cover is words. I just want the words. And that way, the outside and the inside are just kind of continuous with each other. There's no real separation of inside and outside. It's all just one. And it's just the title. It's not flashy. It's not creating an image of something that it's not. It's a concept. And you can decide for yourself what you think about it. So that is basically what led me to design it in this way. And I didn't want my name on it because I wanted it to belong to you when you invited it into your life. I actually thought at first I was going to have my name in the first few pages, but then I decided against that. So I learned a lot about bookmaking. See, I thought you had to have all these, tons of information in the beginning of a book, and I just learned you don't have to. There really are no rules. So, I did put in the very end, I tucked in my name and the copyright information and the name of my publishing company. But it's very subtle. So I love this book because it doesn't feel like it belongs to me. It feels like it's just a concept. So I sometimes pretend like someone else wrote it and I discovered it. So, yeah. So I want to show you a couple of things about the design of the book. So this actually has to do with these forms. So once you have, now the book actually includes this basic forms, the content of basic forms is included inside the creative process diet. So you don't have to get this to do the bindling process of planning your meals a day ahead and following through. But if you want to have a separate booklet, it's a very skinny booklet, and then it's easier to travel with, or you can put it up by your food. And what I like is that when you put it next to your food items, there is a visual similarity. See, in the nutrition facts, well, this is my protein powder, so it says supplement facts. But it's the same thing when it's nutrition facts, is you have this white box. It's not always a white box, but often it is. So I like that often the label of the product has all these different colors, and it might be kind of flashy and have images. But then this is actually the most important place for us to focus our attention when we're deciding what we're going to eat. So the creative process diet and the booklets of forms are suggestive of that. And so it matches. Like you have these thick lines and then the overall white background with black lettering. So it's just text on a white background. So that is basically that was also part of my design inspiration. Also, I haven't seen these in years, but there used to be, I remember when I was growing up, there were these generic food products that they would sell. Now I guess they still have generic items. It's like the store brand, but they try to do kind of a flashy cover, which is kind of sad to me because I really like those very simple generic product packaging. Um, I liked how they looked. It was simple, and I've always loved simplicity. I find simplicity very beautiful. Um, so that is how I designed the cover of the Creative Process Diet.